3 weeks ago, the house next door was empty. Today, it was worth $6 million. That's how I knew something strange was happening. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 42 years old, a single father, and the owner of a small boat repair shop in Willow Bay, a coastal town where news travels faster than the internet and everyone knows when your lawn needs mowing before you do. Life here is simple. The harbor wakes up before sunrise. The diner opens at 6. The bookstore closes at 5. And the old white house next to mine had been empty for almost 2 years. Then, on a Tuesday morning, moving trucks arrived. Not one truck, 3. Huge black trucks, the kind people use when they're transporting expensive things or trying to impress the neighbors. Around 9 o'clock, my daughter Lily nearly broke the kitchen window trying to get a better look. "Dad," she shouted. "Something's happening." I looked up from my coffee. That's usually how moving works. "No." She pointed dramatically toward the road. "Rich people moving." That got my attention. Through the window, I could see workers unloading furniture that probably cost more than my truck. Designer sofas, massive paintings, expensive outdoor furniture. The entire scene looked completely out of place in our quiet neighborhood. Then Lily narrowed her eyes. "Who do you think it is?" "No idea." "Movie star?" "Probably not." "Secret princess?" "Definitely not." "Retired superhero?" "That's not a real job." Lily sighed dramatically. "You never let me have fun." Then she disappeared outside before I could stop her. Which should have worried me. It definitely worried me. 15 minutes later, I found her standing at the fence separating our properties, just standing there, watching, waiting, plotting. I recognized the expression immediately. It was the same look she got before adopting a stray cat, organizing a lemonade business, or convincing half the neighborhood to attend a backyard talent show. "Lily." "Hi, Dad." "What are you doing?" "Observing." Never a good answer. Then she pointed toward the driveway. "Look, a black SUV had just arrived." The driver's door opened, then the passenger door, and for a moment the entire neighborhood seemed to stop moving. A woman stepped out, tall, elegant, dark hair pulled back, sunglasses, simple white blouse and jeans that somehow looked more expensive than my entire wardrobe. She looked familiar. Extremely familiar. Then she removed the sunglasses. My brain immediately stopped working. "No way," I whispered. Lily looked up at me. "You know her?" Unfortunately, I did. Everyone did. Victoria Blake, CEO of Blake Holdings, billionaire. Magazine cover regular, business television superstar, one of the most powerful women in America, and apparently, my new neighbor. Lily's eyes widened. "The CEO?" I nodded slowly. "The CEO." Silence followed. Then my daughter smiled. A dangerous smile. "She's pretty." My stomach dropped immediately. "Don't start." "Start what?" "Whatever this is." Lily grinned wider. "Too late." "Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful." Meanwhile, Victoria Blake was speaking with movers near the front porch. She seemed completely focused on unloading boxes and organizing furniture. Then, as if sensing she was being watched, she glanced toward the fence. Our eyes met briefly. I immediately looked away, like a normal adult. Unfortunately, Lily did not. She waved enthusiastically with both arms. Victoria blinked. Then, surprisingly, she smiled and waved back. Big mistake. Huge mistake. Because from that moment on, Lily considered the two of them friends. That evening, over dinner, my daughter announced her first official conclusion. "She's lonely." I nearly choked on my food. "What?" Lily shrugged. "I can tell. You spoke to her for 3 seconds." Exactly. That explanation somehow made sense to her. Then she pointed her fork at me. "You're lonely too." "I'm not lonely, Dad." The way she said it made me sound ridiculous. Then she sighed dramatically. "You work." Another pause. "You make dinner." Another pause. "You watch fishing documentaries." I pointed at her. "Those are educational. They're old men talking about bait." "Fair point." Then she smiled. "Maybe the new neighbor needs friends." I already knew where this conversation was going. "No. I didn't even say anything. You were about to. Maybe. The terrifying thing was that she looked completely innocent. The next morning I left early for the marina. By noon I'd repaired 2 boat engines, argued with a supplier, and forgotten all about the billionaire living next door. Then Lily called. The moment I answered, I knew something had happened. Dad, what? Don't be mad. My pulse immediately accelerated. Lily, the good news is nobody got hurt. Never in human history has that sentence led to something positive. Then she continued, and technically it wasn't my fault. I closed my eyes. What happened? Silence followed. Then my daughter whispered, I'm at Victoria's house. My soul left my body. Completely. You're where? Victoria's house. Another pause. We're making cookies. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Then I finally managed one sentence. Why are you making cookies with a billionaire? Lily sounded genuinely confused. Because she doesn't know how. Silence. Complete silence. Then she added the sentence that would change everything. Also, she asked if you wanted to come over for coffee when you finish work. My heart stopped. Not because of the invitation, because somehow, in less than 24 hours, my daughter had already infiltrated the home of one of the most famous women in America, and judging by how happy she sounded, she wasn't planning to leave anytime soon. And judging by how happy she sounded, she wasn't planning to leave anytime soon. I arrived at Victoria Blake's house 22 minutes later, not because I was worried, definitely not because I was worried. I simply wanted to make sure my daughter hadn't accidentally broken anything worth more than my mortgage. The moment I stepped onto the front porch, I could already hear laughter from inside. Lily's laughter, and surprisingly, Victoria's. I knocked once. The door opened almost immediately. Then I froze. Not because it was Victoria, because she was covered in flour. Completely covered. There was flour on her jeans, flour on her shirt, flour somehow in her hair. For a moment, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company looked less like a business icon and more like someone who had lost a fight with a bakery. Then she noticed my expression. Don't, I immediately smiled. Don't what? Whatever joke you're thinking about. I wasn't thinking of one. That's a lie. The annoying thing was that she sounded exactly like Lily. Then a small white blur shot past her. My daughter, also covered in flour. Dad, she shouted proudly. We made cookies. I looked at Victoria, then Lily, then the kitchen behind them. The kitchen looked like a crime scene. You attacked the kitchen, I said. Victoria sighed dramatically. In our defense, another pause. The recipe was aggressive. I laughed to spite myself. Then Victoria stepped aside. Come in. The house was beautiful. Not flashy, not extravagant, just warm, comfortable, unexpectedly normal. The living room overlooked the ocean. Books filled several shelves. Framed photographs sat on tables. Yet something felt strange. The place looked furnished, decorated, expensive, but not lived in, like someone had moved in physically without fully arriving emotionally. Then Lily grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the kitchen. Try one. She held up a cookie. It looked dangerous. I examined it carefully. Is it safe? Probably. Victoria laughed from behind us. That's not reassuring. Then, against my better judgment, I took a bite. Silence followed. Complete silence. Lily immediately looked nervous. Well? I chewed thoughtfully. Then nodded. Actually, another bite. That's pretty good. My daughter pumped both fists in victory. Victoria looked genuinely relieved, which was surprising. Then she smiled slightly. Good. Another pause. Because we made 4 dozen. The next hour passed unexpectedly fast. We drank coffee. Lily talked enough for all 3 of us combined, and somehow the conversation became easy, natural, comfortable, which shouldn't have happened. Victoria Blake wasn't supposed to feel comfortable. She was supposed to be intimidating, distant, untouchable. Instead, she was sitting barefoot in her own kitchen arguing with my daughter about whether dolphins were smarter than accountants. Then Lily suddenly stood up. Question. My stomach tightened immediately. Questions from Lily were dangerous. Victoria looked amused. Okay. Why did you move here? Silence followed. The room grew slightly quieter. Then Victoria looked toward the ocean visible through the kitchen windows. I needed a change. Lily nodded slowly. From what? Another pause. Then Victoria smiled. Small, sad, honest, everything. The answer lingered longer than expected. Even Lily seemed to sense it. Then she asked softly, "Were you unhappy?" My pulse immediately accelerated, because that was the kind of question adults usually avoided. Yet Victoria didn't. She looked down at her coffee mug, then out toward the water. Finally, she answered, "I think I forgot how to be happy." Silence settled across the room. Then Lily walked over and hugged her. Just like that. No hesitation, no warning. 1 second they were talking. The next, my daughter had her arms wrapped around one of the most powerful women in America. My soul left my body, completely. Victoria froze, not because she disliked it, because she clearly wasn't expecting it. Then, slowly, she hugged Lily back. Something changed in her expression. Something soft, vulnerable, real. Then Lily pulled away. "That's okay." Victoria blinked. "What's okay?" "Forgetting." My daughter shrugged. "You can learn again." The room became completely silent. Even I didn't know what to say. Then Victoria laughed softly, a shaky laugh. The kind people use when they're trying not to cry, you know. She looked at me. "Your daughter is terrifying. I've been saying that for years." That finally earned a genuine laugh. Later that afternoon, I helped carry several boxes into the garage. Most of the movers had already left. The neighborhood was quiet. The ocean breeze drifted through the open garage door. Then, while lifting a box labeled books, I noticed Victoria struggling with a heavy wooden shelf. Instinctively, I stepped forward. "Need help?" "No." The answer came too quickly. Then she looked at the shelf again. "Maybe." Together we carried it into the house. The task took less than 2 minutes. Yet somehow neither of us rushed to leave afterward. Then Victoria leaned against the wall and smiled slightly. "You know something?" My pulse tightened. "What?" She looked around the room. "Everyone assumes I moved here because I wanted peace." Another pause. "That's not entirely true." Silence followed. Then she laughed softly. "I moved here because I was exhausted." The honesty surprised me. Then again, everything about Victoria lately seemed surprisingly honest. Finally, she looked directly at me. "Have you ever gotten tired of being the person everyone expects you to be?" The question hit harder than it should have, because somehow I understood exactly what she meant. Then I smiled slightly. "Every day." Victoria nodded, like she'd expected that answer, like she'd needed to hear it. Then from somewhere upstairs came a loud crash, followed by Lily's voice. "Good news." My stomach immediately dropped. Victoria closed her eyes. "Why does that sound bad?" Neither of us knew it yet, but whatever Lily had just done upstairs was about to guarantee that Victoria Blake would become much more than our new neighbor. But whatever Lily had just done upstairs was about to guarantee that Victoria Blake would become much more than our new neighbor. The crash echoed through the house. Victoria and I immediately looked toward the ceiling. Then we looked at each other. Then another sound followed. A drawer opening. Something falling. Then Lily shouted, "Everything is under control." Silence. Complete silence. Victoria sighed. "That's never true, is it?" "Not once." We hurried upstairs. The moment we reached the guest bedroom, we stopped. Lily stood in the center of the room, surrounded by papers, markers, tape, and approximately every craft supply known to humanity. One section of the wall had been completely covered with poster board. My stomach dropped instantly. "Lily." "Hi, Dad." "What are you doing?" "Helping." That answer explained absolutely nothing. Then Victoria stepped forward and stared at the giant poster attached to the wall. Across the top, written in colorful letters, were the words, "Welcome to Willow Bay Survival Plan." I closed my eyes. Of course. Naturally. Then Lily pointed proudly at the poster. "You're new." Another pause. "You need help." Victoria bit her lip, clearly trying not to laugh. "I do?" Lily nodded seriously. "Absolutely." Then she began presenting her work like a corporate executive delivering a quarterly report. Section 1. Important places. The diner, the marina, the bookstore, the ice cream shop. Section 2. Important people. Mrs. Henderson, the librarian, Coach Miller, the mailman. Then came Section 3. The title alone made my pulse accelerate. People who will help you if you let them. Underneath were exactly 2 photographs. One of me, one of Lily. Silence filled the room. Then Victoria looked at the poster. Then at us. Then back at the poster. Something softened in her expression. Just for a second. Then Lily continued. Most people leave Willow Bay because they think it's too small. Another pause. They're wrong. The room became unexpectedly quiet. Then Lily smiled. It's just the right size if you have people. Victoria stared at her, completely speechless. The terrifying thing was that my daughter didn't even realize how profound that sounded. To her, it was obvious. Finally, Victoria laughed softly. I think this is the most welcoming thing anyone has ever done for me. Lily looked pleased. Good. Then she pointed toward the bottom of the poster. There's one more section. My stomach immediately dropped. Victoria noticed too. Uh-oh. We both leaned closer. Across the bottom, written in giant red letters, was a new heading. Neighbor activities. Underneath was a handwritten list. Coffee mornings, movie nights, barbecues, fishing trips, holiday dinners. Victoria started laughing immediately. I buried my face in my hands. Then Lily pointed to the final item, family game nights. Silence exploded across the room. Then Victoria laughed even harder. Family game nights? Lily nodded confidently. You live next door now. Another pause. It's basically a legal requirement. Somehow, unbelievably, Victoria didn't seem uncomfortable. If anything, she looked touched. Which surprised me. Then again, maybe it shouldn't have. Because despite the headlines, the magazine covers, and the billions of dollars, Victoria seemed like someone who had spent a very long time alone. Later that evening, after Lily finally returned home, I stood on my back porch watching the sunset. The sky glowed orange across the harbor. Fishing boats drifted toward shore. Everything felt peaceful. Then I heard footsteps. Victoria appeared on the other side of the fence carrying 2 mugs. Peace offering, she said. I smiled. For what? She handed one over. Your daughter redecorated my house. Fair point. Then we stood there quietly sipping coffee. The fence between our properties suddenly felt much smaller than before. Eventually, Victoria broke the silence. Do you know something strange? My pulse tightened slightly. What? She looked toward her house. I've lived in New York for 20 years. Another pause. Nobody ever made me a welcome poster. I laughed softly. To be fair, Lily's methods are unusual. They're effective. The honesty surprised both of us. Then Victoria smiled. I don't think anyone has ever been that excited for me to exist somewhere. The sentence landed harder than expected, because beneath the humor, there was sadness. Real sadness. Then I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I noticed how tired she seemed. Not physically, emotionally, like someone who'd spent years carrying a weight nobody else could see. Then I asked quietly, Are you happy here? Victoria looked toward the ocean. The fading sunlight reflected across the water. Finally she answered, I think I might be. Silence followed. Comfortable silence. The kind that doesn't need filling. Then suddenly a window opened in my house. Dad, Lily shouted. My eyes immediately closed. What? I forgot to ask. I knew I wasn't going to like this. Ask what? Lily grinned from the second-floor window. If Victoria wants to come to movie night tomorrow. Silence exploded across the neighborhood. Victoria immediately laughed. I considered moving to another state. Then Lily pointed dramatically toward Victoria. You have to answer. The CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company stood beside a wooden fence in a tiny coastal town and laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. Then she looked at me. Then toward the window. Then back at me. Am I allowed to say no? She asked. Before I could answer, Lily shouted the response from inside the house. No. And for the first time in years, Victoria Blake laughed without holding anything back. And for the first time in years, Victoria Blake laughed without holding anything back. The next evening, movie night officially became a neighborhood event. I had originally imagined something simple, one movie, a bowl of popcorn, maybe an hour or 2 before everyone went home. Unfortunately, Lily had other ideas. By 6 o'clock, our living room looked like a miniature theater. Blankets covered the couch, pillows covered the floor, popcorn filled 3 giant bowls. Candy somehow appeared from nowhere. Then there was a sign taped to the wall. Movie night rules. Rule number 1, no phones. Rule number 2, no work. Rule number 3, have fun. Rule number 4, Victoria must stay until the end. I stared at the sign. Lily. What? Rule 4. Important rule. I rubbed my forehead. Across the room, Victoria was laughing so hard she could barely stand. I like Rule 4. Of course she did. Then the front door opened. Mrs. Henderson entered carrying brownies. Behind her came Coach Miller with soda. Then the librarian arrived. Apparently word had spread. By 7 o'clock, half the neighborhood was participating. Victoria looked completely stunned. Does this happen often? No. I looked around the crowded room. Usually it's less organized. Lily smiled proudly. I upgraded it. That explained everything. The movie eventually started. A classic romantic comedy, which I strongly suspected had not been chosen accidentally. Throughout the film, Lily kept watching Victoria instead of the screen. Every few minutes, she would lean over and whisper something. Victoria always listened, always smiled, always answered. It was impossible not to notice how comfortable they seemed together. Then halfway through the movie, the power went out. The entire room groaned. Someone dropped popcorn. Somebody else complained dramatically. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Nothing serious, just a passing coastal storm. Then silence settled over the house. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Victoria stood up. Give me 5 minutes. My pulse tightened slightly. For what? She smiled. Trust me. 10 minutes later, every candle in the house was lit. The living room glowed with warm golden light. Victoria had somehow transformed a power outage into the coziest evening Willow Bay had ever seen. Then she organized board games. The movie was forgotten almost immediately. People laughed, competed, cheated. Mrs. Henderson absolutely cheated. Nobody could prove it, but everyone knew. Around 10 o'clock, the neighbors finally left. The house grew quiet. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch halfway through a card game. One arm hung off the cushion. A blanket covered her legs. Victoria smiled softly when she saw her. She was determined to stay awake. She inherited my stubbornness. Victoria laughed. That's unfortunate. Then neither of us moved. The candles still flickered throughout the room. Rain continued tapping softly against the windows. The atmosphere felt different now. Quieter, more personal. Then Victoria sat down beside the sleeping child. Can I tell you something? My pulse immediately accelerated. Sure. She looked down at Lily. Then toward the dark window. Finally she whispered, I almost sold this house. Silence followed. Complete silence. Before moving in, I asked. Victoria nodded. 3 times. My stomach tightened. Why? She smiled sadly. Because I wasn't planning to stay. Another pause. Honestly, I wasn't planning to stay anywhere. The answer lingered. Then she laughed softly. I bought the house because my real estate advisor said it was a good investment. Another pause. I never expected. She looked around the room. The candles, the sleeping child, the quiet little house. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind for days. Why Willow Bay? Victoria stared at the floor, then out the window, then finally answered, because nobody knew me here. The honesty surprised me. Then she continued, in New York, everyone sees the CEO. Another pause. The billionaire. Another pause. The headlines. Her voice softened. Nobody sees me. The room became very quiet. Then she smiled. Small. Vulnerable. Lily does. My chest tightened unexpectedly, because she was right. My daughter didn't care about stock prices, or magazine covers, or net worth. She only cared whether someone was kind, whether they showed up, whether they stayed. Then Victoria looked at me, really looked at me. You do too. My heart forgot how to function. Completely. Then before I could answer, Lily suddenly sat upright. Both of us jumped. "I have an idea," she announced. "Wonderful, absolutely wonderful." The child had been asleep 2 seconds ago. "No," I said immediately. "You haven't heard it. I don't need to." Lily ignored me completely. Then she pointed dramatically toward Victoria. "Tomorrow is Saturday." Victoria nodded cautiously. "Okay. And Saturdays are for neighbors." My stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" Lily grinned. A dangerous grin. The kind that always led to trouble. Then she delivered the sentence that would change the entire weekend. "We're taking Victoria to the town festival." Silence exploded across the room, because every person in Willow Bay attended the annual Harbor Festival. And once Victoria Blake stepped into that crowd, she would stop being the CEO who bought the house next door. She would become part of the town itself. And once Victoria Blake stepped into that crowd, she would stop being the CEO who bought the house next door. She would become part of the town itself. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather. Blue skies, ocean breeze, sunshine reflecting across the harbor. Willow Bay looked like something from a postcard, which was exactly why thousands of visitors arrived every year for the Harbor Festival. The streets filled with food stands, local artists, musicians, fishermen, and tourists. By 8 o'clock, Lily was already dressed and ready. By 8:30, she had reminded me 6 times not to embarrass her. By 9, she was standing on Victoria's porch, ringing the doorbell like she was collecting a debt. I watched from the sidewalk as the front door opened. Victoria appeared wearing simple jeans, white sneakers, and a navy sweater. No designer business suit, no CEO armor, just Victoria. Lily immediately froze, then she nodded approvingly. "Good," Victoria blinked. "Good? You look normal." Silence followed. Then I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. Victoria pointed at her. "Your child is ruthless. I've tried warning people." 10 minutes later, the three of us were walking toward downtown Willow Bay. The festival was already in full swing. Music echoed through the streets. Children ran between booths. Food vendors filled the air with the smell of barbecue and fresh pastries. Everywhere we looked, people were smiling. Then the first person recognized Victoria. My stomach tightened immediately. A tourist near the marina stopped walking. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, several people were whispering. Victoria noticed immediately. The relaxed expression she'd worn all morning faded slightly. Then Lily grabbed her hand. "Ignore them." Victoria looked down. "What?" Lily shrugged. "They're staring because they're bored." The CEO laughed unexpectedly. Then, somehow, the tension disappeared. The first stop was the bakery stand. Then the fishing competition. Then the handmade crafts section. Lily dragged us everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. Around noon, we reached the town square. That was when disaster struck, or, more specifically, Lily struck. The festival organizer stood near the main stage, speaking into a microphone. Unfortunately, Lily knew him. "Mr. Dawson," she shouted. The organizer smiled. Lily. Never a good sign. Then my daughter pointed toward Victoria. "Can she join?" Silence followed. Complete silence. My stomach dropped instantly. "Join what?" I asked. Nobody answered. Which was worse? Then Mr. Dawson smiled. "The Harbor Festival Pie Contest." Victoria blinked. "The what?" 5 minutes later, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation was standing behind a folding table preparing to judge homemade pies. I sat in the audience laughing. Victoria sat on stage regretting every decision she'd made in the last month. Meanwhile, Lily looked delighted. "This is amazing." It got worse. Much worse. Because Victoria took the competition seriously. Extremely seriously. She examined crust texture, filling consistency, flavor balance. At one point, she took notes. Actual notes. By the end of the contest, the crowd loved her. They absolutely loved her. People laughed at her comments, cheered her scores, asked for photographs, not because she was famous, because she was fun. Then Mrs. Henderson won first place, which immediately caused 3 separate arguments and 1 possible conspiracy theory. The afternoon passed quickly after that. Somewhere between the pie contest and the harbor parade, something shifted. Victoria stopped feeling like a visitor. She started feeling like a resident. People greeted her by name, shop owners waved, children ran up to say hello. The walls she'd arrived with began disappearing one conversation at a time. Then, near sunset, the festival moved toward the waterfront. A local band started playing. Families gathered near the docks. The sky turned orange and gold. It should have been the perfect ending. Then Victoria's phone rang. The smile disappeared from her face instantly. My stomach tightened. She looked at the screen, then sighed. "Work?" I asked. She nodded. "Board chairman." Another pause. Again. Lily immediately frowned. "Tell him you're busy." Victoria laughed softly. "I don't think that's how corporations work." The child crossed her arms. "Bad system." Surprisingly, Victoria didn't disagree. Then she answered the call. At first, the conversation seemed normal. Then her expression changed. The warmth faded. The happiness faded. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Several minutes later, she ended the call and stared out toward the ocean. Silence followed. Then I stepped closer. "What happened?" Victoria looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that had nothing to do with sleep. "Finally," she answered. "They want me back in New York." My pulse immediately accelerated. "For how long?" She laughed softly, a humorless laugh. "Maybe forever." The festival noise suddenly felt distant. The music, the laughter, the lights, everything faded into the background. Then Lily appeared beside us. One look at Victoria's face and she immediately knew. Children always know. "You're leaving?" Silence followed. Victoria didn't answer. She didn't have to. The answer was already there. And for the first time since moving into the house next door, the possibility of losing her suddenly felt very real. And for the first time since moving into the house next door, the possibility of losing Victoria suddenly felt very real. The festival continued around us. Music drifted across the harbor. Children laughed. Vendors shouted. Fireworks reflected on the water. Yet somehow all of it felt far away. Victoria stood beside me, staring at her phone, while Lily watched her with growing concern. Finally, Victoria slipped the phone into her pocket and forced a smile. "Everything okay?" Lily asked. Victoria hesitated, then answered honestly, "Not really." My daughter immediately frowned. "That's because of New York." Silence followed. Then Victoria laughed softly. "You're getting very good at this." Lily crossed her arms. "It's obvious." Another pause. "You look happy here." The words landed harder than anyone expected. Victoria looked away toward the harbor lights. "Maybe I do." For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then the fireworks began. Bright colors exploded above the water. The crowd cheered. Children pointed at the sky. Yet I noticed something strange. Victoria wasn't watching the fireworks. She was watching Willow Bay. The families, the boats, the people, the life happening around her, like she was trying to memorize it. The realization unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. Later that night, we walked home together through quiet streets, illuminated by porch lights and moonlight. The festival had ended. The crowds were gone. The town felt peaceful again. When we reached the fence separating our properties, Victoria stopped. For a moment, it looked like she wanted to say something. Then she smiled instead. "Good night." "Good night." Lily hugged her tightly before running inside. Victoria watched her go with an expression I couldn't quite identify. Something warm. Something sad. Then she disappeared into her house. I stood on the porch longer than necessary, watching the lights turn on inside her living room, watching her move through the windows, watching someone who had become important far faster than she should have. The next morning things felt different. Victoria's car remained in the driveway, but the curtains stayed closed. No morning coffee on the porch, no conversation over the fence, no accidental meetings while checking the mail, just silence. Around noon, Lily finally noticed too. "Something's wrong." I looked up from the engine I was repairing. "Why?" Victoria hasn't smiled today. The fact that my daughter monitored neighbor smile frequency was deeply concerning. Then she pointed dramatically toward the house next door. "We need to investigate." Before I could stop her, she was already crossing the yard. 10 minutes later, I found myself standing beside her on Victoria's back deck. The CEO sat alone, overlooking the ocean. A laptop rested beside her. Several legal documents covered the table. Her coffee sat untouched. She looked exhausted, not physically, emotionally, the kind of tired that sleep can't fix. Then Lily sat down beside her without asking permission. "Hi." Victoria looked up and smiled weakly. "Hi. You look sad." Direct as always, Victoria laughed softly. "Do I?" "Yep." Another pause. "Like Dad when he watches documentaries about old fishing boats." I sighed. "Why am I being attacked?" Neither of them answered. Then Lily leaned forward. "Can I ask a question?" Victoria nodded. "Sure." My daughter looked toward the ocean, then back at her. "If you go back to New York, what happens?" Silence followed. The waves rolled gently below the cliffside. Finally, Victoria answered. "I become CEO again." Another pause. "I run the company." Another pause. "I work all the time." Lily considered that carefully. "And then?" Victoria blinked. "Then what?" "Then what do you get?" The question caught her completely off guard. I could see it happen. Then Victoria looked at the legal papers scattered across the table, the contracts, the reports, the plans. Finally she whispered, "I don't know." Lily nodded slowly. "That's not a good sign." Silence followed. Then, for some reason, none of us could disagree. After a while, Lily wandered down toward the beach, searching for shells and sea glass. That left Victoria and me alone. The afternoon sunlight reflected off the water. A fishing boat moved slowly across the horizon. Everything felt quiet. Then Victoria exhaled deeply. "Your daughter asks impossible questions." I smiled. "That's one of her hobbies." Victoria laughed softly. Then the smile faded. She stared out toward the ocean. "Do you know what's strange?" My pulse tightened slightly. "What?" She looked toward her house, then toward mine, then toward the town stretching along the shoreline. 3 weeks ago, I couldn't wait to leave New York. Another pause. Now I can't stop thinking about leaving here. Silence followed. Then she looked directly at me. Vulnerable, honest, unprotected. And I hate that. My chest tightened. Because suddenly, this wasn't about jobs, or companies, or cities. It was about belonging. Finally, I asked quietly, "What do you want?" The question lingered between us. Victoria looked away immediately. Toward the ocean. Toward the future. Toward the life she'd spent years building. Then she whispered the answer so softly I almost missed it. "I think I want this." The words hit harder than anything else she'd said. Not because they were dramatic. Because they were true. Then she laughed nervously. "That probably sounds ridiculous." "No." Another pause. "It doesn't." For a moment neither of us spoke. The silence felt different now. Warmer. More dangerous. Then suddenly my phone buzzed. A text message. "Lily." I opened it immediately. The message contained only 5 words. "I'm giving you privacy." My soul left my body. Completely. Victoria saw my expression. "What?" I handed her the phone. She read the message, then burst out laughing. Real laughter. The kind I'd been missing all day. Then she shook her head. "Your daughter is impossible. I've been telling people that for years. Neither of us knew it yet, but somewhere between that conversation and the setting sun, something important had changed. Because for the first time since Victoria Blake arrived in Willow Bay, she had finally admitted what her heart already knew. The house next door was no longer just a place she lived. It was starting to feel like home. The house next door was no longer just a place Victoria lived. It was becoming part of her life. And somehow, without realizing it, she was becoming part of ours. The following week passed faster than any of us expected. Victoria spent her mornings working remotely from her home office. Lily spent her mornings finding excuses to visit Victoria's house. And I spent my mornings pretending neither of those things bothered me. The problem was that my daughter had stopped being subtle, completely. On Thursday morning I walked into the kitchen and immediately knew something was wrong. Lily was smiling. Not a normal smile, a dangerous smile. The kind that usually resulted in embarrassment, property damage, or emotional manipulation. "Good morning," she said. "No, you don't even know what I was going to say. I don't need to." Lily rolled her eyes dramatically and slid a folder across the table. My stomach immediately dropped. The cover page read, "Operation New Neighbor. Status report." Of course. Naturally. There were charts, notes, percentages, color coding, actual research. I flipped through the pages in disbelief. Victoria happiness level, neighbor integration progress, coffee consumption statistics. Then I reached the final page. Future family probability. I closed the folder immediately. Lily. What? Why does this exist? Science. The terrifying thing was that she sounded sincere. Before I could continue the interrogation, someone knocked on the front door. Lily instantly brightened, which worried me even more. She sprinted across the room and opened the door before I could stop her. Victoria stood outside holding a pie, an actual homemade pie. For several seconds I simply stared at it, then at her, then back at the pie. What's that? Victoria looked down. Pie. I can see that. Mrs. Henderson taught me how to make it. Silence followed. Then Lily gasped dramatically. She's evolving. Victoria immediately burst out laughing. So did I. The pie was terrible, by the way. Absolutely terrible. The crust was uneven. The filling was too sweet. Yet somehow none of us cared, because Victoria spent the entire lunch laughing at herself while Lily declared the pie a historic success. The afternoon drifted by comfortably. Conversation came easily now. There were no awkward silences anymore. No uncertainty. No feeling that Victoria was a stranger. She belonged here. Everyone could see it. Especially Lily. Which meant she was about to do something reckless. That evening, the annual Willow Bay charity auction took place. Every year, the town gathered inside the community center to raise money for the school, marina, and local programs. Usually it was a quiet event. This year was different. Word had spread that Victoria Blake would be attending. By 6 o'clock, the building was packed. Some visitors came for the auction. Others came to see the billionaire who had somehow become Willow Bay's favorite neighbor. Victoria hated the attention immediately. I could see it. Her posture changed. Her smile became more professional, more careful. The CEO version of Victoria returned. Then the reporters arrived. Questions followed her everywhere. Corporate leadership, market performance, New York, business strategy. Every question seemed to drag her further away from Willow Bay. Then Lily intervened. Directly. Of course. She marched between Victoria and a reporter and crossed her arms. She's busy. The reporter blinked. Excuse me? Lily pointed toward the auction tables. She's helping our town. Another pause. You're interrupting. Silence followed. Somehow it worked. The reporter actually backed away. Victoria stared at my daughter, then at me, then back at Lily. Is she always like this? She whispered. Unfortunately, the auction began shortly afterward. Donations, volunteer packages, local experiences, fishing tours, boat rides, cooking lessons, everything progressed normally. Then Lily disappeared. My stomach immediately tightened. 5 minutes later I discovered why. She was standing beside the auctioneer on stage, smiling, waving, looking far too pleased with herself. Oh no, I whispered. Victoria followed my gaze. What did she do? Then the auctioneer spoke. Next item, 1 private boat restoration lesson from Willow Bay's finest craftsman, Ethan Carter. The audience applauded. My soul left my body. Completely. Bidding began immediately. $50, $100, $200, $300. The numbers kept climbing. Then suddenly a voice from the back of the room interrupted. $1,000. Silence exploded across the building. Every head turned. Victoria calmly lowered her bidding card. My pulse immediately stopped functioning. The auctioneer looked stunned. The audience looked stunned. I looked stunned. Only Lily seemed completely unsurprised. In fact, she looked delighted. Sold! Shouted the auctioneer. The crowd erupted into applause. Afterward, I found Victoria near the refreshments table. $1,000? She shrugged casually. It's for charity. Victoria, what? $1,000. She smiled innocently. You should be flattered. The annoying thing was that I was. Then she laughed softly. Besides, I need someone to teach me how boats work. That's your excuse? It's an excellent excuse. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then the local band began playing. Slow music drifted through the community center. Couples moved toward the dance floor. Families gathered together. The atmosphere softened immediately. Warmer, more intimate, more dangerous. Then Lily appeared. Again. Perfect. My stomach dropped instantly. Victoria noticed too. Why did you say that? Lily pointed dramatically toward the dance floor. Because this is the dancing part. Neither of us moved. Everyone dances. Another pause. Especially people who buy $1,000 boat lessons. Victoria laughed. I laughed. Lily didn't. She was completely serious. Then my daughter folded her arms and waited. The band continued playing. The crowd slowly filled the dance floor. And for the first time since Victoria moved into the house next door, there were no more good excuses left. Then Victoria looked up at me, her eyes warm, nervous, hopeful. Well, she said softly, are we really going to let an 8-year-old win? And standing there beneath the lights of the community center, while music floated through the air, and half the town secretly watched, I realized something dangerous. I wasn't afraid of dancing with Victoria Blake. I was afraid of how much I wanted to. I wasn't afraid of dancing with Victoria Blake. I was afraid of how much I wanted to. The realization hit me harder than it should have. For a moment, the entire room seemed to fade into the background. The music, the conversations, the laughter, everything disappeared except Victoria standing in front of me and Lily, watching like she was about to witness the greatest victory of her young life. Then Victoria smiled. That bad? I laughed softly. You have no idea. Her eyes softened. Then, before I could overthink it, I offered my hand. Victoria looked down at it, then back at me. After a brief moment, she smiled and placed her hand in mine. Somewhere behind us, Lily made a sound that can only be described as a victory celebration. The crowd reacted too. A few people clapped. Someone whistled. Mrs. Henderson looked ready to cry. I considered moving to another country. Instead, I led Victoria onto the dance floor. The song was slow, not painfully romantic, just enough to make everything feel dangerous. We moved carefully at first, both pretending this was completely normal. Do you know how to dance? Victoria asked. Not particularly. Good, she smiled. Neither do I. That somehow made things easier. The tension faded. Conversation returned. I still can't believe you paid $1,000. Victoria laughed. It's for charity. That's becoming your answer for everything. Because it's a useful answer. I shook my head. Then she looked around the community center. Families danced together. Friends laughed near the refreshment tables. Children ran between chairs. The entire room radiated warmth. Victoria watched quietly for several seconds. Then she sighed. I missed this. My pulse tightened. Missed what? She looked toward the crowd. People. Another pause. Not meetings. Another pause. Not investors. Another pause. Just people. The honesty hit harder than expected. Then she looked directly at me. I forgot how much I missed normal life. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Victoria smiled softly. 3 months ago, I would have hated this event. I laughed. The auction? The entire town. That earned another laugh. Then she continued. I would have stayed in New York answering emails and pretending I was too busy for things like this. Her voice softened. And I would have missed all of it. My heart immediately forgot how to function. The song eventually ended, yet neither of us stepped apart right away. Unfortunately, Lily noticed. Of course she did. She appeared beside us carrying 2 cups of lemonade. That was nice. Victoria accepted one. Thank you. Lily nodded thoughtfully. You should do it again. Do what again? Victoria asked. Exist near each other. I closed my eyes. Victoria nearly choked on her drink. The child was impossible. Completely impossible. The auction continued. More donations, more raffles, more community projects. The evening should have ended peacefully. Instead, reality arrived. Victoria's phone rang. The smile disappeared from her face instantly. I noticed. So did Lily. The screen showed a name, Ava Reynolds. Victoria answered immediately. Hey. At first she listened quietly. Then her expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough for me to know something was wrong. Very wrong. She stood and walked toward the hallway for privacy. Lily watched her leave. That's bad. Maybe. No. She shook her head. That's bad. The terrifying thing was that she was usually right. Nearly 20 minutes later, Victoria returned. The warmth was gone. The happiness was gone. The CEO had returned. Not because she wanted to, because she had to. I stood immediately. What happened? For a second, she didn't answer. Then she laughed softly. A sad laugh. The kind people use when they're trying not to panic. The board called an emergency meeting. My stomach tightened. When? Monday morning. Silence followed. Today was Thursday. Then Victoria looked around the room. The families, the neighbors, the town that had somehow become important to her. Finally, she whispered the sentence neither Lily nor I wanted to hear. I have to fly back to New York. Everything seemed to stop. The music continued. People laughed. The auction carried on. Yet somehow none of it mattered anymore. Lily looked up at her. How long? Victoria didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. Finally she whispered, I don't know. The words settled heavily between us. For the first time since Victoria moved into the house next door, Willow Bay wasn't worried about whether she belonged here. We were worried about whether she would stay. And judging by the look in her eyes, Victoria wasn't sure anymore either. And judging by the look in her eyes, Victoria wasn't sure anymore either. The ride home from the charity auction felt completely different from the ride there. A few hours earlier, Willow Bay had felt warm, safe, and full of possibility. Now every streetlight seemed to remind us that time was running out. Nobody talked much. Lily sat quietly in the back seat, which was unusual enough to concern both of us. Victoria stared out the window watching the town pass by. The bookstore, the diner, the marina, the little places that had become part of her daily life. When we finally reached our houses, nobody rushed to leave. We stood beside the fence in the cool night air. The ocean breeze drifted through the neighborhood. Everything felt strangely fragile. Then Lily finally spoke. Do you have to go? Victoria looked at her. Really looked at her. Then smiled sadly. I think so. Why? The question sounded simple. It wasn't. Victoria glanced toward the dark ocean beyond the houses. Because sometimes responsibilities don't give you a choice. Lily frowned. That's a terrible rule. For the first time that night, Victoria laughed. A small laugh. But real. Maybe it is. Then Lily walked over and hugged her. Not quickly, not casually. She held on. Victoria hugged her back immediately. Neither of them seemed eager to let go. When they finally separated, Lily looked unusually serious. Just don't forget us. The words hit like a punch. Victoria's smile vanished instantly. Then she crouched beside her. I couldn't forget you if I tried. Lily seemed satisfied with that answer. Then she disappeared inside the house, leaving Victoria and me alone beneath the porch lights. Silence followed. Comfortable once. Not anymore. Then Victoria exhaled slowly. She's going to break my heart. I smiled sadly. Get in line. For a moment neither of us laughed. Then she looked toward her house. I should start packing. The sentence felt final. Too final. Then she hesitated. Would you? Another pause. Would you like some coffee? My pulse immediately tightened. It was almost midnight. Neither of us needed coffee, which meant the invitation wasn't really about coffee. 20 minutes later, we were sitting on her back porch overlooking the moonlit ocean. 2 mugs rested on the table between us. Neither of us seemed interested in drinking. Victoria leaned back in her chair and stared at the water. I hate this. The honesty surprised me. Then again, lately everything about her seemed honest. Leaving? I asked. She nodded slowly. For the first time in years, I finally know where I want to be. Another pause. And now I have to walk away from it. Silence followed. Then she laughed softly. Do you know what's funny? What? Victoria looked toward me. Her eyes reflected the porch light. 3 months ago I would have celebrated this. Another pause. Emergency meeting. Corporate crisis. Important decisions. She shook her head. That used to make me feel important. My chest tightened. And now? Victoria looked toward my house. Toward the light glowing in Lily's bedroom window. Then back at me. Now it just feels lonely. The answer lingered between us. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I asked the question I hadn't wanted to ask. What happens if you stay? Victoria laughed. Not because it was funny, because it wasn't. The board would lose their minds. Another pause. Investors would panic. Another pause. Financial reporters would have a national meltdown. That earned a smile. Then her expression softened. But honestly, she looked directly at me. I don't think that's what scares me. My pulse accelerated. What does? Silence followed, long enough for my heartbeat to become very aware of itself. Then Victoria answered quietly, wanting it this much. The words landed harder than anything she'd said all night, because suddenly this wasn't about New York, or the company, or responsibility. It was about us, about the life she'd found here, about the people she'd started to love. Then neither of us looked away. The moment stretched longer than it should have, longer than either of us expected. Then a familiar voice shattered the silence. I knew it. My soul immediately left my body. We both turned. Lily stood in my backyard wearing pajamas and holding binoculars. Binoculars. Actual binoculars. Victoria covered her face. I stared at my daughter. Why do you have binoculars? Investigation. It's midnight. Important investigations don't sleep. Victoria started laughing so hard she nearly fell out of her chair. Lily pointed dramatically between us. I knew you were having feelings. My entire nervous system shut down. Then she nodded proudly. This is excellent progress. Before either of us could recover, she disappeared back into the house. Leaving destruction behind as usual, Victoria wiped tears from her eyes. Your daughter is impossible. I've accepted that. Then we both laughed. Really laughed. And somehow, for a few minutes, the fear disappeared. The sadness disappeared. The deadline disappeared. It was just us, the ocean, the night, and the feeling that neither of us wanted this chapter to end. Unfortunately, the next morning arrived anyway. And with it came a black SUV pulling into Victoria's driveway. New York had arrived to bring her home. And with it came a black SUV pulling into Victoria's driveway. New York had arrived to bring her home. The moment I saw the vehicle, my stomach tightened. Not because it was unexpected, because it was real. Until now, Victoria leaving had been an idea, a possibility. Suddenly it was a schedule, a suitcase, a driver waiting outside. Reality. Across the street, Lily stood beside me on the porch, staring at the SUV like it had personally insulted her. I don't like that car. Neither do I. Can we hide it? I laughed softly. Unfortunately, no. My daughter crossed her arms. Worth asking. The front door next door opened a few minutes later. Victoria stepped outside carrying a phone and several folders. The smile she gave us was warm, but I could see the exhaustion behind it. She hadn't slept much. Neither had I. Then the driver approached her. They exchanged a few words. He handed her a schedule. She looked at it for less than 5 seconds before sighing. Even from across the street, I could tell she hated every line on that page. Then she looked over and saw us watching. Her expression softened immediately. She walked across the lawn toward our house. Lily met her halfway. You're leaving. No, hello. No small talk. Straight to the point. Victoria crouched beside her. Not today. Lily blinked. Really? Really? Another pause. Tomorrow morning. My daughter looked relieved for approximately 3 seconds. Then she frowned again. Tomorrow is still terrible. Victoria laughed softly. I know. Then Lily hugged her. Tight, fierce, protective, the kind of hug people give when they're trying to hold on to something they don't want to lose. When they finally separated, Victoria stood and looked at me. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled. Coffee? My pulse tightened. Always. An hour later, we sat together on my back porch while Lily rode her bike up and down the street. The ocean breeze drifted through the neighborhood. It was one of those perfect Willow Bay mornings that made leaving seem even more ridiculous. Victoria wrapped both hands around her coffee mug and stared at the water. I hate airports. I laughed. That's random. She smiled. Not really. Another pause. Airports mean goodbye. Silence followed. Then she looked down at her cup. I used to love them. Another pause. Every flight meant something exciting. Another pause. A new deal. A new city. A new opportunity. Her voice softened. Now they just feel lonely. The honesty settled between us. Then neither of us spoke for a while. Eventually, Victoria looked toward Lily. "Do you know what scares me?" My pulse immediately accelerated. "What?" She watched my daughter circle the block on her bicycle. How easy this became. Another pause. You. Another pause. Her. Another pause. This town. My heart forgot how to function. Then Victoria laughed softly. "That's probably not something I should admit." "Why?" She looked directly at me. "Because people like me aren't supposed to walk away from everything they built." Silence followed. Then I answered quietly. "Maybe people like you aren't supposed to be lonely either." The words escaped before I could stop them. Victoria froze, completely froze. Then she looked away toward the ocean. I could see emotion flicker across her face. Real emotion, vulnerable emotion. Finally she whispered, "That's not fair." "Probably not." Another pause. Still true. Neither of us spoke after that. The rest of the day passed faster than it should have. Victoria handled meetings remotely, packed suitcases, answered calls, prepared for New York. Meanwhile, Lily entered what I can only describe as emergency mode. She baked cookies, drew pictures, delivered handwritten notes. At one point, she created a document titled "Reasons You Should Stay in Willow Bay." It contained 17 bullet points. Number 1 simply read, "Because we like you." Number 17 read, "Because New York doesn't have me." Victoria laughed so hard she cried. Then she saved the document anyway. That evening, the three of us ate dinner together on Victoria's back deck overlooking the ocean. The sunset painted the sky orange and gold. Nobody mentioned tomorrow. Not directly. Instead, we talked about movies, boats, local gossip, Mrs. Henderson's ongoing war against squirrels, anything except the obvious. Then, as darkness settled across the water, Lily disappeared into the house. A few minutes later, she returned carrying a small gift bag. Victoria looked surprised. "What's this?" Lily handed it over. "Open it later." Victoria smiled. "What's inside?" "Classified information." Of course it was. Then my daughter sat back down and looked suspiciously emotional, which immediately made me emotional, which was deeply unfair. Later, after Lily finally went home to sleep, Victoria and I remained on the deck. The ocean rolled quietly beneath the moonlight. Neither of us seemed eager for the night to end. Then Victoria looked at me, really looked at me. "Can I tell you something?" My pulse immediately accelerated. "Sure." She smiled nervously. It was the first time I'd ever seen Victoria Blake nervous. "When I bought this house." Another pause. "I planned to stay for 2 weeks." I laughed softly. That worked out well. She laughed too. Then her smile faded slightly. "I didn't think anyone would notice if I left." Silence followed. Then she looked toward my house, toward Lily's bedroom window, toward the life she'd somehow become part of. Finally she whispered, "Now I don't know how to leave." The words hit harder than anything else she'd said. Because suddenly I understood something. Victoria wasn't afraid of New York. She was afraid of missing what she'd found here. Then neither of us looked away. The moment stretched longer than it should have, longer than either of us expected. Then slowly, almost unconsciously, Victoria reached across the table and took my hand. Silence followed. Complete silence. The ocean rolled softly in the darkness. Somewhere a boat horn echoed across the harbor. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke, because for the first time since she moved into the house next door, neither of us could pretend this was only friendship anymore. And neither of us knew that tomorrow's flight to New York was about to become the most important decision of Victoria Blake's life. And neither of us knew that tomorrow's flight to New York was about to become the most important decision of Victoria Blake's life. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought about the black SUV waiting in Victoria's driveway, about New York, about boardrooms and investors and everything Willow Bay wasn't. Around 6 in the morning, I finally gave up and walked onto the porch with a cup of coffee. The sky was still dark blue. The harbor was quiet. Most of the town was asleep. Then I noticed a light on next door. Victoria was awake too. For a moment, I considered leaving her alone. Then my phone buzzed. A text message. "Victoria," only 3 words. "Can't sleep either?" I smiled despite myself. A few minutes later, I crossed the yard carrying 2 cups of coffee. Victoria sat on her porch wrapped in a sweater, staring toward the ocean. Her suitcase rested beside the front door. The sight hit harder than I expected. She accepted the coffee and smiled softly. "Thanks. Couldn't sleep?" Victoria laughed. "Not even a little." Silence followed, the kind that no longer felt awkward. Then she looked toward the suitcase. "Funny thing is," another pause. "For years I dreamed about getting home from business trips." She shook her head. "Now I'm sitting beside a suitcase wishing I could throw it into the ocean." That earned a laugh. Then her smile faded. "I don't want to go." The honesty landed between us, heavy, real. Finally, I asked the question neither of us had wanted to say out loud. "Then why are you?" Victoria stared at the horizon. The first light of dawn painted the water gold. "Because everyone expects me to." Another pause. "The board." Another pause. "The investors." Another pause. "The media." Then she looked down at her coffee. "I've spent 20 years being who everyone needed me to be." Silence followed. Then she whispered, "I don't even know who I am without that." My chest tightened. Because suddenly this wasn't about New York anymore. It was about identity, about fear, about letting go. Before I could answer, the front door behind us exploded open. Lily, of course. My daughter appeared fully dressed at 6:30 in the morning, which should have been illegal. She marched across the porch carrying a large manila envelope. Her expression was serious, dangerous, determined. "Before you leave," she announced, "you have to take this." Victoria blinked. "What's inside?" Lily handed it over. "Evidence." My soul immediately left my body. Victoria looked at me. "Should I be concerned?" "Probably." Lily crossed her arms. "Open it at the airport." "Why?" "Because if you open it now, you'll cry." Silence followed. Then Victoria laughed softly. "That sounds suspicious." "It should." Somehow that answer made perfect sense. The morning moved too quickly after that. The driver arrived. The SUV engine started. Suitcases were loaded. Reality kept moving forward no matter how badly we wanted it to stop. Then came the goodbyes. Lily hugged Victoria first. Longer than usual. Harder than usual. Neither of them seemed willing to let go. When they finally separated, both looked suspiciously emotional. Then Victoria turned toward me. The world seemed to go quiet. The ocean, the wind, everything. Just for a moment. "Well?" she said softly. "Well," I answered. Neither of us moved. Neither of us knew what to say. Because some goodbyes become complicated when feelings get involved. Finally, Victoria smiled. Small, nervous, beautiful. "Thank you." My pulse tightened. "For what?" She looked toward the town, the house next door, the life she'd accidentally found. Then her eyes returned to mine. "For reminding me what happiness feels like." The words hit harder than anything else. Then, before I could answer, the driver cleared his throat politely. Time had run out. Victoria nodded once, then climbed into the SUV. The door closed. The vehicle slowly pulled away from the curb. Lily waved until it disappeared around the corner. Then she stopped. Silence followed. Complete silence. Finally, she looked up at me. "She's coming back." My pulse tightened. "You think?" Lily nodded confidently. "I know." Another pause. "Because I put the important stuff in the envelope." My stomach dropped immediately. 3 hours later, Victoria sat alone inside the airport executive lounge, waiting for her flight to New York. Around her, people worked on laptops and answered phone calls. The old world was already trying to reclaim her. Then she noticed the envelope. Lily's envelope. For a moment she simply stared at it. Then curiosity won. She opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of pages, photographs, drawings, notes, memories, every picture Lily had secretly collected during the past month. Victoria laughing at the festival. Victoria making terrible pie. Victoria sitting on the beach. Victoria helping at the marina. Victoria standing beside our family. At the very bottom was a folded piece of paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. "Dear Victoria." If you're reading this, you're probably at the airport. That means you're doing the thing adults always do when they're scared. You're leaving. Victoria laughed through sudden tears. Then she kept reading. You said Willow Bay helped you remember how to be happy. Dad says people should go where they're happiest. So I did some research. Another page fell out. A handwritten chart. Typical Lily. At the top were 2 columns. New York. Willow Bay. Under New York, Lily had written, meetings, stress, reporters. Under Willow Bay, friends, ocean, pancakes, family. Then the final line, if one place feels like work and the other place feels like home, why is this so hard? Love, Lily. Silence filled the lounge. Complete silence. Victoria stared at the letter, then read it again, then a third time. Finally tears rolled down her cheeks. Not because of sadness, because somewhere between a welcome poster, a pie contest, a dance, and a little girl who refused to give up on her, she had already made her choice. She just hadn't admitted it yet. Then her phone buzzed. Boarding had begun. Flight 172 to New York was ready for departure. Victoria looked at the notification, then at Lily's letter, then toward the runway outside the window. And for the first time in 20 years, Victoria Blake did something completely unexpected. She stood up, picked up her suitcase, walked away from the gate, and left the airport. Because sometimes the hardest decision in life isn't choosing where to go, it's finally admitting where you belong. Because sometimes the hardest decision in life isn't choosing where to go, it's finally admitting where you belong. Victoria Blake walked out of the airport carrying her suitcase and a letter written by an 8-year-old girl. For the first time in 20 years, she ignored a boarding announcement, ignored a meeting, ignored expectations. Instead, she stepped outside into the morning sunlight and called the one person she trusted most. Ava answered immediately. Please tell me you're boarding. Victoria smiled through tears. I'm not. Silence exploded through the phone. Then Ava laughed. A real laugh. Finally. Victoria blinked. Finally? Victoria? Everyone already knows. Another pause. You've been miserable for years. The words landed harder than expected. Then Ava continued. I've watched you build the perfect career and the loneliest life imaginable. Silence followed. Victoria looked toward the parking lot, toward the future. Finally she whispered, what if I'm making a mistake? Ava didn't hesitate. Then it's the happiest mistake you've ever made. The call ended a few minutes later. Victoria stood there for a moment staring at the sky. Then she smiled. For the first time in weeks, she felt completely certain. 3 hours later, Willow Bay was enjoying a perfectly ordinary afternoon. I was working in the marina. Lily was supposedly helping with homework, which meant she was almost certainly doing anything except homework. Life had returned to normal, or at least I was trying to convince myself it had. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Look up. My heart immediately stopped. Completely stopped. I turned toward the harbor road. A familiar black SUV was pulling into town. At first I thought I was imagining it. Then the vehicle stopped. The door opened, and Victoria stepped out. My pulse exploded. For several seconds neither of us moved. Then she smiled. Small. Nervous. Hopeful. Hi. I stared at her. Hi. Another pause. Then I looked at the suitcase. Miss your flight? Victoria laughed softly. Something like that. Silence followed. Then she took a deep breath. I left. The airport? The airport. Another pause. The meeting. Another pause. The plan. Then she looked directly at me. I left all of it. The harbor seemed to disappear around us. The boats. The people. The noise. Everything faded into the background. Finally, I managed to ask the obvious question. Why? Victoria smiled. A real smile. The kind that reached her eyes. Because an 8-year-old gave me a presentation. I laughed immediately. Then she stepped closer, and because she was right, my heart forgot how to function. Then Victoria looked around Willow Bay. The marina, the shops, the ocean, the life she'd accidentally fallen into. Finally, her eyes returned to mine. I kept asking myself where I was supposed to be. Another pause. Turns out I already knew. Silence followed. Then neither of us looked away. Finally, she whispered, "I belong here." The words hit harder than anything else. Then she smiled nervously. "If that's okay." Before I could answer, a familiar voice echoed across the harbor. She came back. My soul immediately left my body. Lily appeared at full speed from somewhere behind the bait shop. Nobody knows how. Nobody ever knows how. 1 second she wasn't there. The next she was sprinting toward us like a tiny emotional tornado. Victoria barely had time to react before Lily launched herself into her arms. "I knew it," she shouted. "I absolutely knew it." Victoria laughed through tears and hugged her tightly. "You were right. I know." The confidence was unbelievable. Then Lily pulled back and narrowed her eyes. "Wait." Her gaze shifted between us. "Did you tell him yet?" My stomach dropped instantly. Victoria looked confused. "Tell him what?" Lily threw both hands into the air dramatically. "Oh my God." Then she marched away, muttering about incompetent adults. The next few months changed everything. Victoria negotiated a new arrangement with her company. She remained chairwoman of Blake Holdings but no longer served as day-to-day CEO. Most executives expected disaster. Instead, the company thrived. Apparently, thousands of talented employees could function without Victoria personally approving every decision. The revelation shocked everyone except Ava. Victoria stayed in Willow Bay. Not temporarily. Permanently. She renovated the house next door, joined local charities, sponsored school programs, helped rebuild parts of the marina. Somewhere along the way, she stopped being the billionaire who moved into town and became simply Victoria, our Victoria. The neighbor, the friend, the woman everyone waved to at the diner. Then 1 year later, on a warm summer evening, the entire town gathered for the Harbor Festival, the same festival where everything had begun to change. Music drifted through the air, boats floated beneath strings of lights, families laughed together near the waterfront, and Victoria stood beside me watching the sunset. "You know," she said softly, "I almost never bought that house." My pulse tightened. "Really?" She nodded. "I changed my mind 3 times. I laughed. "Good thing you didn't." Victoria smiled. "Very good thing." Then she slipped her hand into mine. Naturally, effortlessly, like she'd been doing it forever. The harbor glowed gold beneath the setting sun. The moment felt perfect. Then I reached into my pocket. My heart immediately began hammering. Victoria noticed. "What are you doing?" I laughed nervously. Something irresponsible. Her eyes widened instantly. "Ethan." Too late. I was already kneeling. Somewhere behind us, Lily screamed loud enough to frighten seagulls. Victoria covered her face with both hands. Tears appeared instantly. Then I opened the small box. "A year ago, you bought the house next door because you wanted somewhere quiet." My voice shook slightly. "You stayed because you became part of our lives." Another pause. "And somewhere along the way, you became the best part of mine." Tears rolled down her cheeks immediately. Then I smiled. "Will you marry me?" Victoria started laughing and crying at the same time. Then she nodded, again and again. "Yes." Another tearful laugh. "Obviously, yes." Lily reached us 3 seconds later and nearly tackled both of us into the harbor. "I won," she shouted. "This counts as a win for me." The entire town erupted into applause. "Mrs. Henderson cried. The marina workers cheered. Someone started playing music. And standing there beneath the sunset with Victoria in my arms and Lily, celebrating like she'd personally negotiated world peace, I realized something. The house next door had never really changed our lives. The woman who lived there had. Because sometimes family doesn't arrive the way you expect. Sometimes it moves in next door. The end.